So good morning, everybody, and welcome to our next monthly o-a-sys webinar this month of September, where we'll be covering the Opera 3 importing the standard functionality, and I'll also be looking at some other areas. Some quick agenda for this morning. We've just had the welcome and introductions. Myself, you know me by now. I'm Bruce, the Sales Marketing Director at o-a-sys. And I do these monthly webinars just as a reintroduction to certain areas in Opera. And there is a whole host of this available now on the website on the news pages covering from the month of February up to now. Then we'll have a quick read through some slides about the module, the import wizard, and what it's about. Then I will do a demo and we'll literally look at almost each import through that wizard. Then we'll look at the other areas in Opera 3, which is not the wizard, where you can import information from, and we'll look at some third-party import utilities. These include a couple from o-a-sys and one from a partner that we deal with called Dark Lake. And then I'll open the floor for some questions if there is anything there. So firstly, once you when you log into Opera 3 and you open the administration area, you'll find the import wizard. And when you select this command in the import folder, the application runs a wizard, as you can see on the screen, that will process and guide you through the steps that's needed to take the information you must enter to import your data. You can only import one file type at a time, so you need to run the wizard separately for each of the records you want to import. So you import through two different file types. One is a DBF file, the other is a CSV file for using the import wizard. So if a database DBF file is used as the data source, then subject to certain criteria, the database file need only contain those fields that you wish to import. However, there are several mandatory fields which must be included, otherwise the import file will be rejected. I mean, it's like saying if I'm going to import a customer, like you can see here in the bottom, the customer name and account should be a mandatory field. So this is what it's trying to show us. So some information when you import is mandatory, otherwise the import can't work. The following table therefore shows us a list of typical database file names that could be used to import account names and addresses into the sales ledger, for example. I want you to notice the field names, because field names is the same as you would use when we look next at the CSV file import. So if a CSV file, a comma separated value file, is used as the data source, then it can be created with or without field names. So if it's without field names, it literally is a sequence of data separated by a comma in a certain order. If you have field names, you have the field name in order of how you have it, and then the next line would be the data, line by line data for the information you want to import. In effect, this is an Excel file that's just been converted to a CSV, each being a column and a square in the Excel file. Fine. So either you can include this information with or without column headings, and you'll see that when we do so later through the import. It's important to mention validation, because each record read by the import wizard is validated before writing it to the database. So if this validation fails at any stage, the record's not imported and a message is added to the audit file. Generally, if an error occurs, the current record will not be imported. Certain validation failures result in warnings rather than errors. Unlike errors, warnings do not interrupt the application. Audit report and file. So when this is completed, the publisher form appears and it asks you how to output the destination of the audit report. When you run the import wizard, certain things happen. Once you've selected the information you want to import, the import wizard has a whole host of separate tick boxes, shall we say, that allows and controls the import that you do. So I'm going to quickly go through some of these, but when we do the actual information importing in a minute, you will notice that this screen changes depending on the import you are doing. So for example, if you do a customer sales account import, you won't see the update nominal there. That just won't happen. So the show progress bar means that when I'm running the import, there's a bar in the middle that shows me how the import is going. Well, you might want to see this, especially if you're importing a large data set, to show you how it's progressing. Allow keyboard interrupts means that if I do anything on the keyboard, it interrupts the process and nothing is going to be imported. The update target files is a tick box that we toggle with. Firstly, when we want to check our data for importing, we untick that box. We don't want it to update the actual database, but the process allows us to validate the data before we actually decide to import it. But it can show us errors, for example, so it's really important doing that. The override existing records is grayed out in this screen. However, depending on the import you select, you can override some of the existing data that appears in the customer database or in any database. So, for example, if I import customer accounts, I have the ability to override an existing record by wanting to change the territory or the region on a bunch of customers. I can import that information and override the existing record to do so. Terminate if errors found basically means that when there is an error found in the import process, it stops immediately and nothing is imported, and it gives you the information, of course, via the audit report we mentioned. Suppress warnings. Well, warnings is information that it just warns you, but it still will import the information. You can suppress those warnings if you want to. Then in this instance, update the nominal. This has got to do when you import a nominal journal, for example. Do you want to update the nominal? And if you tick the box, you get to update which period and year you're updating, depending on whether you've got open period accounting or not. And if you do have open period accounting, you can tick to bypass that open period accounting and select the actual nominal posting date for the information you are importing. Of course, if you have those unticked, like in this instance, the journal will be imported, but in nominal journals in Opera 3, you would still have to go and tick select to post that journal. So that kind of covers all of that. Let's have a quick look through the actual information in Opera 3. So to access the import wizard, we log into our Opera, and if we've got access to the administration area, and we've got our import wizard there. So if I run my import wizard, you see the screen we presented with is what we've seen several times now earlier on, and it just welcomes us to the wizard and so we can import information through selected data. The next screen shows us all the different kinds of information that we can import, and depending on what we select, we will then pick up the actual import file that we have obviously pre-set up, and after that we'll get the selection of information we can do when we import that. So let's start off right from the top and let's look at the sales customers import. It's highlighted. I'm going to click on next, and here it wants me to pick up my sales customers folder. Now I've put all my information in an import folder, and I want to look at the CSV, and I'm importing my sales customers. I've named it what the table name would be, S name, sales customer name, S name. I want to pick that table up. I know my table has headings in, and I can show you that. Let me just find that file. I'll do that in a moment. So I know I have CSV files included in my column heading, so I'm going to select that and click on next. And this is where you can now see this import wizard progress area has changed from what I've shown you earlier on. So the show progress bar is the same, allow keyboard interrupts, the same idea, update target files, untick if I want to check the import, tick if I want to import that, if I want to override existing records, so if I'm going to do that, terminate it if errors are found, and suppress warning. I'm not going to worry about that. and I'm going to override that, and I'm going to update target files because I've checked this 100 times and the process is exactly the same. So I'm going to click on next and click on my start button, and as quick as that, it's imported the few records I had in that file. You will notice that there were no warnings and there were no rejections, and 2 records were imported. And say OK to that, and it will finish my wizard, give me the output as it said for the audit file, and just gives me that same information again in an audit report. What I obviously have now within my sales ledger is I've imported these first 2 customers that you see in here. They didn't exist before, and obviously I've now got them imported, and whatever I want to do with these customers, I can come in here, I can change information. It's imported standard information for me, but minimum information was needed to import the data, and it would set defaults on all the others, as you know, your Opera data. Let's carry on with that import wizard. The next thing, we're going to quickly import some sales transactions for those 2 customers. Now, I must stress these sales transactions might be a list of invoices that you've created on another system, or you create Word invoices, you stick them on an Excel so you can import the information into Opera. This is the kind of sales transactions I'm talking about, not sales order processing documents. Those come here at the bottom. So in sales transactions, if you think of an Opera invoice, you've got a header and you've got details. You've got the header that contains your customer information and some detail on reference numbers. And of course, you've got the detail which contains the details of the actual invoice or credit note that you're importing. So we need to pick up again in the same way the two files. So from here, I'm going to pick up my sales transaction table. And from here, I'm going to pick up my sales analysis table. I know these have CSVs in. I'm going to click next to that. Again, you can see the progress bar this time have changed because I'm importing something totally different. So I'm going to keep it as it is. I want to update the nominal with the information, the sales information, the analysis of it. I don't need to bypass OPA at this point. I'm just going to go next to that, and I'm going to import that information. So there are a couple of warnings, and there are 2 records imported. A warning, as I said before, doesn't stop the import from working. It will just warn me that something might have not been found. So for example, in this case, it couldn't find the destination country, or the country I said was invalid, so it set it to the home country, which is absolutely fine because I didn't select any destination countries within my import file. So that now had imported within my sales ledger, within these first 2 customers I have now, suddenly I have a balance there of 120 and of a balance there of 240. And if I look at the transaction, I can see the import information I've imported, and of course the analysis that sits behind it. So this analysis is what's in that SNL, or the second table we select for these transactional imports. I'm going back to the import wizard. The purchase suppliers and the purchase transactions import, well, it's exactly the same as what we've just seen in the sales customers and the sales transactions. You have a purchase name table for your suppliers, and you have 2 tables in the transactions that you select the information from. And what you get is exactly the same as the sales. So I'm not going to cover those again. The nominal account, well, if you need to change your nominal structure or you want additional nominal accounts, you can import it through this. Very straightforward. Again, you pick up the file that you want to import. This will be our nominal account table. I'm going to say next on that. And again, here you can't override existing information when you do nominal imports. So you can't change existing nominal accounts. So just worth mentioning, that's only available when that functionality is there for the import you are doing. I'm going to just start my import, kick it off. It's happy. It's imported 6 accounts for me. It's giving me my audit report that you see every single time. And of course, now when I go to my nominal accounts, I've imported a new set of sales accounts since we started selling catering equipment and drinks and frozen stuff. So all these J codes here, I've now imported through that import I just did. The import sets the type and the subtype, which defines your structure. So you get to do a lot through that import by importing a whole host of information through that for the nominal accounts. Moving on from the accounts, you might want to import nominal journals, for example. In my case, I've got a couple of journals I want to import. It's month-end journals, one for prepayments, the other one for accruals. So in a journal scenario, I've got the same idea. I've got a header and I've got details. The details defines the lines in my journal. That has to balance, of course. And the header defines the structure of my journal. So let's go back in, import my journal, which was again, just a couple of tables to look at. So we've got our nominal header, select that. I've got my nominal details, select that. I've got column headings in. I'm going to go next, and here we go. I've got a whole set of different information now that I can import against. Because this is a journal, I can select to update the nominal and which period I'm updating. This might be okay because I am in period 9 at the moment, as we're on the 28th of September. So that could be fine for me to do that. The rest of the information is fine. I don't need to bypass open period accounting because it's going to post on the date I've specified on the import. Click on next, click on start. It's going through, it's find my journal. There are 2 journals to import for the couple of lines each on them, and it's done that for me. Now, how do I see this journal? And I'll show you that in a second. It just shows me again my audit report. Back in my nominal journals, I now here at the bottom can see that journal 11222 period end and period end prepayments. If I look at the general screen, I can see that the journal has been posted. Last posted today. The date posted was today because that was what I've defined on the journal import on the date. It's posted as a reversing journal and it's retained journal. Reversing, as you know, means that when I run a period end, it will reverse the information on the journal automatically for me as part of the period end routine, and the accrual one exactly the same. The details behind these, this is what's been imported through that journal I just did. So the details had all these information in it. So going back to our import wizard, I'm going to look at the stock items import. The stock item import is quite a big thing. There are so many different ways of importing your stock items through this functionality in here. Either everything or some of it. You have to be careful because if you want to overwrite some information in the stock, you can't just have the basic information because it might also overwrite information you already had in the find. So it's just as a way of figuring out how you want this import to work for you. But the stock item import, like all of the others, are pretty straightforward. You click on next, you pick up your stock item file. These are all CSVs. I've got one with supply codes, one without supply codes. So it depends again on how you want to import your data. I'm going to do it with supply codes and hope it works. Go on a next here. Override existing records. I'm not going to tick that on because I know I don't have an existing thing in there that I'm going to import, and go on to the start. And it's reported a couple of records for me in here, as you can see. Again, just my audit report. So if I go to my stock items now, the 2 items I've just imported was this that one there, and that one there. So I've just imported a couple of new items in here. It's set for me everything it needs to do. The prices have been imported through my import file. I can set those, or I can leave them blank and set them in here. But I get to import every and all the information you see on this screen for a stock item, as well as what you see within the action button here. I'm not going to talk through stock transactions because these would be transactions that you record on a different system for your stock items and then just import so the stock is correct. I don't really know anybody that does that because most of the time the stock would be managed through buying and selling through the sales order processing and the purchase order processing. The invoicing and sales order processing is the same idea as the sales transaction. You have a iHead and an iTran file that you pick up, and it imports a document into the system where it places a document within this area in our sales order processing, and that document can then be managed and processed and progressed through to all the other areas that I needed to do. So the document can become a quote or an order, delivery or invoice or whatever I needed to do. But I get to import that information. So, for example, if I use a specialist system that manages the costing for my production and also produces the invoices that my customers get, I might want to import that invoice information as a document and progress that through through Opera into the invoice in the system. That would be one scenario that you would be looking at. But this is about importing documents that you can then manage throughout the system. The next thing I want to briefly look at is payroll timesheets. So payroll timesheets really is one of the most simplest imports there is, because you have to literally define the employee, the payment code, and what it is you're importing, either temp value, permanent value, unit, or rate. So you get to import all that information through one file. Again, I've preset up a file that's got a couple of bits of information in. Let's pick up that payroll timesheets there. I've got headers in my file. I want to update target files. There's no override in this timesheet information. I want to mention if you import timesheets, it imports into the open period you have. It doesn't matter what that period is. You don't get to define the period you're importing into. The import is the period you are currently in, the one you're going to be calculating for the next payroll. You can see it's imported 3 records for me in my timesheet here. Again, my audit report just tells me what it's imported. And of course, now within my payroll, if I find the people I've imported information against, I will find that against the payments and deductions screen, there might be, for example, here I've imported a bonus there, and that's now there. So when I calculate, this information is now on here. It's a very, very simple actual payroll timesheet import. I'm sorry about that. I want to show you, well, before we go any further, I just want to show you when you look at a timesheet file, for example, what we're looking at, just so you understand the structure. So what you're looking at is, as I said before, the column headings would be the actual field names in the database. And I'm going to show you in a second how you can find these and set them up. So in this instance, we've got the reference number, which is our employee reference. We've got a transaction code, which is the payment or deduction method code we use. This is the permanent value. This is the temporary value. That's the unit, and that's the rate. So we can set some of these, all of these, and this is just what's been imported in my import file a moment ago. I want to open the wizard. And costing timesheets, I want to talk about very briefly. Costing timesheets is when I want to cost my information to my jobs. Somehow I can import costing timesheets, which can also transfer to the payroll for payment. So again, this is just the payroll. It's just another file that has been preset that you can import. This one we call JWhipper for some reason. And all it does the same thing. It imports timesheets for costing that I can then do. And in this information, I knew there were going to be an error. Just want to show you what happens. It's errored on some information, and I suspect it perhaps couldn't find a job or something like that. So yes, it couldn't find the cost rate for the job I'm importing because I just bashed some nonsense into the file to show that, you know, what kind of happens. Obviously, I can now go and correct this in the file and rerun my import because at this stage nothing had been imported. The last thing I want to mention in here is payroll employee contact details. This has got to do with importing email information for sending payslips, P45s and P60s by email, and allows us to import several bits of information around that. I'm not going to do this here because I want to show you when we look at some other areas of import, how that works. It's exactly the same thing. What I do want to show you is how do you know which table information needs to go into these import files, what's mandatory. So in our help file, if we open our help file, pardon me, it automatically opens on the import wizard if that is what I've got open there. It gives me some information about the imports, about the table names, and some explanation, kind of what I've gone through a moment ago, with or without column headings, what these progress information does, etc. But next to the information here, it breaks down all the individual imports. So I'm going to look at the first two customer and sales transactions. What it does, it gives us, if I want to import sales customers, this is the mandatory information I need to have. So the table name is S name, or I can call it sales customers. It really doesn't matter. But the field names, if I'm using a CSV file, needs to be those two fields. The SN is the account name, and that's the name I'm giving to it. So what am I coding it, and what is the actual name? If I want to import any of the other bits of information, I can do so, and we can certainly help you. And there are loads of templates available that would allow you to import much more than that. But you can set your own templates up from here. The sales transactions, it shows you those needs to be in two files, the sales transaction file and the sales analysis file. And in here, it shows you exactly the same information as you would expect. So which information would be mandatory if I do a sales information or an analysis information. Again, we've got some guides and some templates available for these, so you can just really fill your information in for the imports. I also want to talk about the payroll timesheets import, because here it shows you what you need to do and what the transaction codes are and what all these other fields are that you can import your customer information for. As you can see, if it's new employees, you can even pull in balance to date this period and permanent to date values, etc., from here. So there's quite powerful import. It also explains what needs to go in some of these field names, like the transaction code, what it is and where you're going to get it. So it allows you to do it. But again, o-a-sys have got templates for all of these, and we can certainly help you. They take minutes to set up these kind of templates for the standard import. So I think that is the actual import wizard, and everything you can import through it. Really quite a bit of powerful information there. Next, I want to move on to a couple of areas in Opera 3 that is not development, but that allows you to import information into the system, but it's not the wizard either. So we have something in fixed assets. So if you buy fixed assets and you set it up the first time, we can do a spreadsheet import. It gives you even an example XLS sheet that you can import. You set the sheet up, you put it in a certain location in your data, and you press the OK button, and it will import those fixed assets so that they can become part of your fixed asset cycle in Opera 3. In payroll, the very first time you do a payroll setting up the email payslips, you have the ability, and this one is grayed up, but you have the ability to create a skeleton CSV file that can be imported, so you can set information on the file that will be imported in bulk. And this is exactly the same imported runs as we've seen in the import wizard. The bottom one I didn't run, and I'll do that in a second when we go back into Opera. And then the last place for those of us who's got SPM or CRM functionality from Opera 3, it allows us to do a spreadsheet import for our SPM contacts. In the process, we'll also set up the companies for these contacts. So quite a nice import if you buy data, and I say that in inverted commas, for example. So let's pop back to Opera for a minute. So within my fixed assets, and that sits in our financials, in utilities, I've got the spreadsheet import. Really, if I come in here, I can click on the example XLS. It's going to open one for me. It's going to save it for me and show me what is in the information. But if I say OK to that, it will find in the Z underscore spreadsheet, which is the company I'm in, company Z, it will find the spreadsheet, and it would automatically import the information. As you can see, I didn't even have to set where the file is because it's just there where I've dropped it. In this instance now, I think I've imported a couple of, yeah, these bottom two, a Citron and a C4 and C5, imported it with all the information that goes with it, when it was bought, when it was acquired, when it starts depreciation, any values already associated with it, what the life cycle is, etc. This is all come through. And of course, this is a live asset, means it will go through the normal process of depreciation when it's next depreciated. The second area is in my payroll and HR. When I do my email admin, my quick email payslip set up, I get this for the first time. I can then create this CSV file, which I can then import right through here if I need to do so. I can't do that because mine has already been set up. So I thought what I can show you is within here, the payroll contact details. This is the same. Set up the same file effectively that's being imported. Somewhere it is. Email. There we go. And this will then just import that information. I used the same thing. You see, you get a different set of questions because it's linked to the import that you would do through the actual payroll and HR modules. Okay, and 4 records were imported. All I imported was a couple of email addresses for myself and for some of the employees on there through that functionality. Of course, it does the normal validation. So if emails exist already in the system, it's going to tell you it can't import someone because the email exists. And as you know, you can't share email addresses in the Opera data for payroll and HR, for example. And the last place I want to mention where the standard is the CRM. In my contacts, I can import my utilities, spreadsheet import, and if I start the import, in this instance, again, I can have an example file that I can set for myself to import. I've already done that, put some information in there. And it will import the data for me. It might put some data down there for me. I'm going to import, and it's added the information. Here we go. This is who it's added for me. a little bit different audit report to what we've seen before, but it's in this, so it shows me actual information that it's imported. So that is what I like to call the other Opera 3 imports, areas you can import that's not bespoke or development, that is, everybody has got access to if those modules are present in your systems. I want to talk about Opera 3 importing, but in this instance, the different utilities covered by o-a-sys and of course by Darklake. So from an o-a-sys point of view, we have several utilities, but when it comes to importing information, the timesheet and employee import is one of our more recent ones. And then we have the stock XLS import again, that's been around for quite a while. And as you guys know by now, I've been partnered with Darklake Utilities of Darklake Development, sorry, for quite a while. And they do a utility called PegLink. PegLink is all about importing information into Opera 3. Under no circumstances could I cover all of those imports when I do a demo, because there's probably about 35 or 40 within that little system that you can do all different kind of things. And I will just show that to you in Opera 3 in a minute. I won't be running any imports on that. So let's pop back into Opera. So from a timesheet point of view for payroll and HR, within the maintenance area, we have something called the timesheet imports. We set the imports we want to do, what kinds they are, which companies they for, which groups they for, which profiles are being imported payment-wise, for example. Then to run them imports, there are twofold to it: to import payroll timesheets or transactions. We've got an import timesheet here. All you do is you select the type you've done, where the file is, and say OK, and it imports our timesheets exactly as we've seen earlier on through the admin one. Then also within our personnel area, oh, and the other thing to mention is you have the ability here to reverse the import in hours, because, well, you could have imported something wrong, or next week's timesheet, or accidentally imported last week's again. So you have the ability to reverse the imports in there. In personnel, you have new employee imports. So the ability to import a new employee, again, setting out your import file, and then within our utilities, we've got import new employees. And again, here we just select the type, which group we're importing, and pick up the file and say, OK, and we import the information. It's pretty much the same as through all the other information, but there is a bigger scope of functionality within this one. It's got more functionality, and it might serve a broader bunch of customers really within that. The second thing I wanted to mention was the actual stock imports. Again, it's literally is a stock import that's been set. You select the file name you want to import. You select whether you want to update your quote cost prices, your quote selling prices. There's a template you can open from here. You can pick up the file name where it should be. Let's just check if I have something here. o-a-sys stock import there. I'm going to select that. And I can update prices. Well, it's a stock import, so it's not going to update prices. It's a new stock import. But as with the other one here, there is very much scope to update existing information across different areas. So you can see here, you can import your stock with new cost and selling prices, for example, and in turn it will update the sales order processing area where you've got quotes on, for example. I'm going to run that import. I didn't do a backup, but that's fine. And in my stock now, I would have some items imported. There's 112 and 113. I've just imported through there. And as you can see, all these things have been set through that import. Of course, I can overwrite anything here I want now, but that's been imported through that functionality. And then I want to mention PegLink. That's the o-a-sys utilities. There are something else I perhaps want to mention, although I haven't said anything about it in the update. Is there's a batch stock recode. So we do have a little utility that can be run by an administrator, and it's called stock recode. This one is grayed out on here, but I can recode some stock items if there are no existing transactions against them. So it means that if I find something, probably like the new one I just set up, where was it? CMAT 113. I probably will find that available because there's no transactions yet against it. So I can use that functionality and give it a new stock code, of course. But if I have to if I've entered a bunch of new stock items and suddenly realized they all should have different codes, I can use this utility and do a batch stock recode and just pick up my recode file. There we go. And the file really is just two columns. It's the old number and next to it, the new number. And if Pete's done the development, there's always a question of whether you've done an update or not. All I've done now is I've recoded a couple of my stock items. I'm not sure which one I coded there. I think it was 111 that I made into something else. So it's all recoded now, and it would have gone to a different place here in the code structure that I've done. And I'm so sorry, I can't remember what the code was that I changed it to. The very last thing I want to mention here is PegLink. PegLink is a very large utility and you pay for individual areas within it. So each area like sales, purchase, nominal costing, SOP, POP, payroll, stock, they each are separately priced utilities within this kind of PegLink overhead. So as you can see, you can import sales transactions, purchase transactions, nominal journal and ledgers. You can import costing information. You can import sales order processing information, including several stages of documents, orders, quotes. You can all import purchase order processing information, which is not something you very often find for Opera. That's very good. And then, of course, it's got a massive side to payroll. The payroll is one of the easiest things to link to an existing time and attendance system, because all you have to do is set and map the output file that you get from the time and attendance to do the import in this. Very flexible how it works, and a fantastic tool. Again, it links to also links to HMRC for P6 and P9 information, and it also allows you to employee import into the system as well as export if you need to link to HR systems. And lastly, there also is a stock import and a stock list import with some information that you can do through there. Pretty much the same kind of stock side to the XLS import from Pete. So there you go. I think that covers all the utilities we've had, all the third-party ones we've got. And now I'm wondering if anybody has got any questions, any observations. Now would be a good time to bring them up, and hopefully I can try and help. No, if no one's got anything, then I'm going to say thank you very much. And remember, I run these webinars on a monthly basis. You can find the next one on the Customer Zone, looking for the monthly webinars. And also next month is the fixed assets webinar. So we'll just look at fixed assets module in its entirety, from the setup to the running, and what you can do in it. So thank you very much for joining me. And if there's nothing else, I look forward to seeing you on the next one.